Okay, so welcome. I'm slowly getting used to this. I'm not really sure how good this is, but I'm getting good feedback, so I'm encouraged. Today's subject, title sheet, brain training without money. This subject, brain training without money, was brought out by one of the members of our group, Toronto Parents of Labeled Children, and it was based on a concern that one of these parents had because she needs OT services. She had to line up for it for a long time. She got very, very few sessions. It was very frustrating. And now she wants to go private, but private is very expensive. The family does not have resources to get the OT, and she's asking, is there any advice? She's not alone. There are literally tens of thousands of Toronto area parents who are really in exactly the same situation. Learning and life skills are lagging, and they don't have any way to fill the gap because everything costs money. So just to indicate how everything costs money, my next slide is this one. Here's how, let me look at it too. Here's how money works. Money is required for MaxiMind unless you've got an insurance plan that will cover that, and many of our parents do. So partially or fully that could be covered. And the same thing with occupational therapy, physical therapy. Kids need lots of things. Some need speech and language. Some need tutoring. They may need a psychologist for an assessment or for counseling. Then there's the medication that the doctor prescribes. There's sports, there's music. Everything we want to do with a kid costs money. Kids are expensive, but they are worth it. So what happens when you don't have money is a lot of these things fall by the wayside, and it's very, very unfortunate. So brain training without money is really what I'm talking about. It's really, you could extend this to other services without money, but here's what I can share with you. And similar to last time, we're going to talk about 3 attitudes. Hang on a second. 3 attitudes and 3 strategies. So this won't be very long, but I hope some of this will be useful. Attitude tip number 1. Whoops. I'll get the hang of this. I need brain training. Attitude tip number 1 is be pushy. Pushy parents are successful parents. Where did I get this idea? I got this idea from Dr. Karen Pape, MD. She's the author of this book, The Boy Who Could Run But Not Walk. She was kind enough to give me a copy of this expensive book when we met recently in her Yorkville Avenue condominium and had a lovely afternoon talking about research and development, children's neuroplasticity, how to access it. Karen Pape, excuse me, is a pioneer of the new science of neuroplasticity. 30, 40, perhaps a bit more years ago, when the science was not even named and it was in its infancy, she was using the methodology that was getting brain change in cerebral palsy children, and these kids had plateaued. She even opened a clinic, and she was creating miracles where the world was saying, no way. So she gave a public lecture once, I was privileged to attend, and she made this point that successful parents are pushy parents. What does it mean to be pushy? Well, says Dr. Pape, children grow in milestones. Have you ever noticed? A kid gets to a certain level where they stand up. First they stand up, then they sit down. Stand up, sit down. Stand up, fall down. Stand up, sit down. And they'll do this for days and days and weeks until standing turns into holding on and walking sideways. A new skill. Fantastic. And then they walk sideways and walk sideways and walk sideways and walk sideways, and they fall down, and they walk sideways and fall down and walk sideways and fall down until they walk sideways and don't fall down. And then when they get there to that new plateau, they take the next big step. They walk forwards, and they walk forwards and fall down, and they walk forwards and fall down and walk forwards and fall down, and they'll do it hundreds and thousands of times until they walk forwards and don't fall down. And then they'll walk backwards then they'll run, then they'll do different things, and they will climb and they'll do this and that. We grow from plateau to plateau through intense activity and repetition. And it's intense activity and repetition that is one of the big secrets behind the brain change that we get when we do brain training. How do you, now, excuse me, therapists are paid to coach kids through these exercises so that they will do them over and over again so that they will make new steps, and those new steps will have new neural networks, and those neural networks will stick, and the child will improve. What happens when you can't access that? You've got to be the pushy parent that gets the kid to the next level. So just like there are milestones in walking, you can't push it, you can facilitate it, you can encourage it, you can really make a big difference in their development if you'll simply celebrate their successes and just make it feel safe and fun and good to keep on trying. The same thing with new skills of any type. So you should know where the kid is stuck. You should know what the expectations are. You should be able to chunk them down into smaller pieces or get some expert to help you, and then push that kid to the next level in a friendly way, not a dictatorial way. Push, but not castigate. Push and encourage, like a coach would, or an uncle would, or something like that. So that is regarding that. That's regarding pushing the child. You also may want to push the school. There could be accommodations that you're looking for, modifications that you're looking for. There could be an assessment that you want done, and they're dragging their feet. Maybe you've got the right. You need to know what your rights are, and in a very, very nice way, push. If you don't ask, the answer is no. If you ask, the answer might be yes or no, but it's an automatic no if you don't try. So pushing is a thing. You learn how to advocate and coach your child to success. I'd like to talk about another founder and major promoter of the idea of neuroplasticity. He is considered very widely one of the top 1 or 2 neuroplasticians in our world, and that is Dr. Norman Doidge, author of 2 New York Times bestsellers. I happen to have them right here. Not just for this talk, they're always on my desk. I'm a big hero because we use the science of neuroplasticity every day. His book, The Brain That Changes Itself, his first book, Dr. Norman Doidge, is fantastic. His second book, The Brain's Way of Healing, also fantastic. And one of the key technologies that Maximind uses in order to get brain change is featured in Dr. Doidge's The Brain's Way of Healing. It's chapter 8, A Bridge of Sound. And our medical advisor, Dr. Minson, is featured in that chapter as well. What can sound do to help improve a child? But that's not what my point is. In Dr. Doidge's book, he talks about heroes who have done miraculous things to change themselves and those around them. One of them is the Bachirita boys, or they were men. These 2 brothers had a father who had suffered a debilitating stroke. The father, as I recall, was a professor, I think at City University of New York. I don't remember what, but he couldn't walk and he couldn't talk after his terrible stroke. Those children went in there day after day, week after week, month after month, and got their dad back to health and full participation in his active and in his academic life. How? They got down on the floor with him and realized that he could hold a position on his hands and knees if he leaned against the wall. They got him to hold that position, and they got him to do that again and again. Then they got him to crawl against the wall. Eventually, step by step, they got him standing. They got him walking with lots of support, walking with minimal support, until he was walking with no support. Repetition, repetition, repetition. push, push, push. And the same thing with the talking. Make this sound, make that sound, put them together, do it again, do it again, do it again. You have to believe, but you have to push. They were successful to the extent that he went back to mountain climbing and university teaching. This is the power of neuroplasticity. You do things with your body, your brain organizes itself around the scar tissue, around the damaged area, around the missing area, as it is in some cases, and new functions become masterfully created with the whole neurological infrastructure just because there was a will. And sometimes your child needs to borrow your will until they get the will of their own. And this is what coaching is about, knowing how to push. Now, many of you parents are going to say, that is not me. It's not. First of all, some of you will say, it's not right. We have to just let the child grow at his own pace, at her own pace. You can't push children to succeed. I agree. You don't want to torment them. You don't want to demand from them. But just like they have to go to school in the morning, it's not an elective. They're going to have to do some activities that you'll find out about through your learning that are going to help them succeed if they can do it. Occupational therapists, for example, use parents a lot. Do this exercise, do that exercise, do it over and over again. And we tend to rely heavily on the professional. And the professional will come in and say, did you do your homework? And you will probably say no. Well, for this mom that wrote me, the one that stimulated this subject today, my message is there's no professional to rely on. You're going to have to take the bull by the horns and create that. It's one of the key things. So, if it's not your nature and you're not confident, whatever you do know, you must do, because where there's a will, there's a way. Attitude tip number 2. Attitude tip number 2 is the power of not knowing. I actually wanted to call this embrace ignorance, but it didn't sound right. I'm not a big advocate of ignorance. I'm a big advocate of knowing if you know or if you don't know. The power of not knowing is this. You desperately need information in order to make a difference. If you don't have the information, you can't say, oh, well, and throw up your hands. You have to find a way to get the information you need. You don't have to know anything. You have to know what it is that you don't know, figure out who knows, and then go find it. There are TED Talks, there are YouTube videos, there are documents. The whole universe is at your fingertips when you're online. And by knowing what you don't know, you can really make that difference. Let me just take a quick look here. Yeah, here's an example. A friend of mine is the grandson of a billionaire. He grew up on the poor side of the tracks, happy family, successful in their own way, but not on the money scale. And he once asked his granddad, how did he become such a successful multi-billionaire? He said, you know what? I never had a good idea in my entire life. I let other people mow the lawn, and I would just go walk on the grass. What does that mean? They were the geniuses, they were the inventors, they were the trailblazers, they broke new ground. I just took a look at what they did and said, maybe we can turn that into a business model. Because usually the inventors aren't the business people. So this is the idea. You're not the expert that's going to dream up a new system of OT or PT or brain training. But what you can do is find out what the experts know and import some of that into the life of you and your child so that you can get that difference. This is the power of not knowing. And the truth is, I founded Maximind Learning in exactly the same way. When the entire medical, pharmacological, social work, psychology, tutoring model fell apart and left me with a child that was floundering in school and socially because he just wasn't processing things the same way as other people. I did not know what to do. And I couldn't even Google around. I had to Netscape around back in those days, 15 years ago. But I started to amass some tools and they made a bit of a difference. And that's a whole story for another time. But MaxiMind wouldn't exist if I didn't embrace not knowing and start looking for what I believed had to be there, knowledge that other people had of what I could do to help my own child because I needed my own resources. That was tip number 2, the power of not knowing. Tip number 3 is about availability. And this is something you need to do. This is a hard thing. It's an attitude tip. Be available emotionally and physically. What does it mean to be available? It means when your kid comes home from school, or when your kid has an issue, or when your kid is really, really mad or bad or sad, and they all go together, of course, you listen. You validate their feelings. You acknowledge how they feel. Maybe their behavior is wrong, but right now it's not the time to correct their behavior. It's the time to be there emotionally for them. And you have to be there physically, meaning you have to dedicate time. You got to shut off your smartphone. You got to say no calls during this hour. This is my time with my kid. And it may be partly structured, and it should be, but partly your time with your child should be unstructured, so you can be available. That availability is really, really important. Okay, so that's the attitude tips. Now, strategy tips. What can you do? You want to do some brain training, make a difference in how they think? Well, there's only so much I can do, right? Because I've got my own busy life taking care of these kids and work and other things. So here it is. Strategy tip number 1, chores are not chores. Chores are life lessons. Think about what that occupational therapist does. They get you doing up buttons, and they get you folding things and coloring and cutting things. Well, think about this. What is making supper? Oh, taking a package, taking scissors, cutting it, moving it out, get down into that cupboard, open it up, pull out the pot, fill it with water, carry it without spilling, put it on the stove. You know, all these different steps of cooking, of setting a table, of clearing a table, of even slicing. And young children can be taught to slice. They're going to wind up touching knives eventually. So yes, it slows you down. You are not making supper. You are brain training your child 2 ways. One way, you're giving them life skills that they need. The second way is you're giving them the self-confidence they can actually do something to completion that's important and relevant. So, and I guess the third is you're building a family dynamic of we do things together, and that is extremely important. Chores are not chores. Laundry, fabulous opportunity, but you have to look at it as an opportunity. Strategy tip number 2. Back to basics, food and sleep. I've got a document I'll share next time, and we'll find a way to go through some of it. But with 500 clients over the last, 7 years, I've learned a lot from what they've done. Of course, there are studies and this and that, but the power of feedback from clients is really, really great. Regarding food, one of the biggest things, and this is one of the first things that came out in the literature, food dyes. Look for the chemical names of those food dyes, get rid of them. A lot of parents have seen huge results simply from eliminating artificially colored foods. And I know we need those snack foods, etc., etc., etc. But if we also need to make a difference in our child's life, we can make certain changes. Be careful with sugar. You can't totally eliminate sugar, but you can certainly not invite it into your home in large quantities, because that sugar will drive their behavior as well. And then there are kids that are gluten intolerant, dairy intolerant, and this can affect cognition as well. There are a number of other things. There are supplements to talk about, and some of them are better referenced than others, but these are things you take into your body. It's a basic. What am I taking into my body that can affect my cognition, affect my attention skills, affect my self-regulation and my behavior? And there's lots of stuff like that. Sleep. I have a colleague in Brooklyn, and he does a kind of therapy using many modalities, helping kids that are suffering with learning. And he did an intake with a family, a girl that was in grade 4, and she was functioning at basically early grade 2 level in the middle towards the end of grade 4. So she was like 2.5 years behind. Very serious case. But the family was kind of on wheels. There was no bedtime. Whenever there was an event, the whole family would go, and they would go late. And the kid was like, the kid would stay up till all hours, and the kid was always dragging herself around tired. And he did a cognitive test, and he wasn't really happy with the results. He said, you know what? Give this kid 10 hours a night, 4 nights straight, and then bring her back here. I'd like to see her again. 9-year-old girl. Not so horrible to have 10 hours a night. It took them 3 months. But they came back 3 months later, having done it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they came in for a Thursday appointment. He did the academic and cognitive skill testing once more. She was excelling. She was meeting and surpassing a bit expectations, basically functioning like a grade 5 girl, only because she had gotten to sleep. This is something that you don't need a therapist for. This is something that you can try to implement just using your willpower at home. So that's strategy tip number 2. Food and sleep are key. Of course, we have tools, we have technologies, we can help with those things, but we're talking about what can you do on your own. Strategy tip number 3, I'm being realistic. Play, play, play. The time that you can spend with your child, and this is to arbitrarily old ages, you'd be surprised how long this works. Play, but use your play time. Choose your activities, your fun activities wisely. They should be brain building, not brain busting. I'll give you just one example. There's a thing called super brain yoga, which is very popular. I do not advise my coaches to do this with kids. I'm not advising you to do it. As parent to parent, which is how we're speaking now, I'd say, yeah, try super brain yoga. There are actually doctors that back it up. But because there aren't enough studies that I've seen that validate it, I cannot train my coaches to do that with your kid. It's just a kind of a standard that I have. So, but I don't mind showing you what super brain yoga is. And if you Google it online, you'll find a lot better of a video than this one is going to be. So let me just see if I can move my chair out of the way and get over to the wall here. Can you still see me here? So you take one hand, your left hand, and hold your right ear, with your thumb pointing forward, and your right hand holding your left earlobe with your thumb pointing forward, and you bend your knees. While you bend your knees, you breathe in, and then exhale. Some say what you're supposed to do to balance your energy is to keep your tongue near the roof of your mouth while you do this. So I'll do that again without talking. Wait. Super brain yoga. A lot of therapists literally swear by this because they've seen autistic kids, for example, or ADHD kids totally calm down and their behavior becomes normalized because they spent a minute or 2 doing this and then coming back into the classroom and being self-regulated. Anyway, I've shared with you a few strategies, some basic attitudes, brain training without money. That was our theme for today. We'll have another session next week at 12:15. Thank you very much for joining, and have a great day.